Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Outlaws Gunslingers with Bang and Dang. And for all of you longtime listeners and people keeping up with us, you might notice
Keeping up.
this isn't a Mafia episode. What?
We decided to do that once a month now.
Yeah. Changing it officially. Mafia episodes will be exclusively I guess exclusively, but the first episode of each month will be Mafia, and the rest during that month will keep on going on with the old true crime stuff, because doing the Mafia, especially family by family, is getting a little worn out already, because a lot of these guys we're talking about have the same exact story, and the same stories repeated 17 times in each thing. So give it a little break, and we'll do once a month of those, and then we'll continue on in some moitas, some real moitas. The Mafia just wasn't as entertaining as I thought it was going to be. I thought there was going to be more moitas. Yeah, so we'll continue on with the old true crime stuff. And soon, eventually work our way into the old serial killers that we've been talking about for 2 years now. Starting off with a decent one, I guess. The old Hi-Fi murders. Torture of 5 people resulting in 3 deaths during a robbery at the Hi-Fi shop, which was a home audio store in Ogden, Utah, on April 22nd, 1974, by Dale Pierre, William Andrews, and Keith Roberts. But before that, go check out our YouTube at Bang Dang Network. Give us a subscription. We do shorts, clips, full episodes as well, obviously, of all of our podcasts, including this one, and also our exclusive Dart League that we got on YouTube at Bang Dang Network, or if you listen on the old podcast, Spotify, Apple, give us a review.
Right.
And with that, we'll start off like we usually do.
Season 3 on that one, guys.
Season 3, just starting. Thanks for interrupting me every time I try to do things. We'll start off.
It's about to be pretty good. Couple extra seasons coming on. Only half-hour shows, and
we'll start out like we usually do and profile the killer's backgrounds as much as we can on these ones. There's only one of these guys actually have extensive background information on him, which is Dale Selby Pierre, who was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago and moved to Brooklyn at the age of 17. May of 1973, Pierre entered active service with the United States Air Force, and in September of 73 was transferred to Hill Air Force Base as a helicopter mechanic. Almost on arrival, he became the prime suspect in the October 5th, 1973 murder of Edward Jefferson, an Air Force sergeant at Hill Air Force Base, although police lacked enough evidence to file charges.
Holy shit, really?
At the time of the Hi-Fi murders, Pierre was out on bail for the theft of a car from a Salt Lake City car dealer.
No.
Not much is known about William Andrews' background, except for that he too was a mechanic at the Air Force Base along with Pierre, and we could not find any reliable background on Keith Roberts as far as his upbringing and right before whatever happened before the murders.
Right. Well, that very night, Pierre, Andrews, Roberts, and 3 other men, they drove in 2 vans to the Hi-Fi shop, 2323 Washington Boulevard in Ogden, just before closing time. 4 of the group entered the shop brandishing handguns, while Roberts and another man remained in the vehicles. 2 employees, Stanley Walker, age 20, Michelle Ansley, age 18. They were in the store at this very time and were taken hostage. Pierre and Andrews took the 2 into the store's basement and bound them. The gang then began robbing the store. Later on, a 16-year-old boy, Courtney Naisbitt, who dropped by to thank Walker for allowing him to park his car in the store's parking lot earlier that day, as he ran an errand next door.
What a thoughtful young fellow.
Right. I don't know why he even asked. Just park it and do what you got to do.
Well, it's 1974, different time, but...
Right. He was taken hostage and tied up in the basement with Walker and Ansley.
Well, later
He's like, I wish you would have said no.
Right, right. Later that evening, Orrin Walker, who was Stanley Walker's 43-year-old father, became worried that his son had not returned home and went to the store. Courtney Nasbitt's mother, Carol Peterson Nasbitt, also arrived at the shop later that evening looking for her son, who was late getting home as well. Both Orrin and Carol were taken hostage and tied up in the basement with the rest.
Oh, jeez.
They had contained a total of 5 hostages in the basement at this time.
Shit. How long does it take to rob this damn store?
I know, dude. What the hell?
Well, I guess it's got heavy equipment. It's going to take a while. 5 people now held hostage in the basement. Pierre told Andrews to get something from the van. Andrews returned with a bottle in a brown paper bag, from which Pierre poured a cup of Drano brand drain cleaner. Pierre ordered Oren to administer it to the other hostages, but he refused and was bound, gagged, and then left face down on the basement floor. They can't just rob it. Now they got to make him drink Drano. Jeez, Pierre and Andrews then propped the hostages into sitting positions and forced them to drink Drano, telling them it was vodka laced with sleeping pills.
Okay.
Does Drano smell like vodka?
I don't think so. It immediately caused blisters on the victims' lips.
Obviously.
Burnt their tongues and throats and peeled the flesh around their mouths. Oh. Ansley, still begging for her life, was forced to drink the Drano, although Oren said she coughed less than the other victims. Well, Pierre, maybe this is why Pierre and Andrews tried to duct tape the hostage's mouth shut to hold the quantities of drain cleaner in and to silence their screams, but the ooze and blisters prevented the adhesive from sticking.
Can you imagine this whole...
It was probably tearing off skin and stuff, too.
Why do they even drink it?
What are you going to do? You kind of have to when they're putting it in, you're forcing it in your mouth. Oren was the last to be given the Drano, but seeing what was happening to the other hostages allowed it to pour out of his mouth and then mimic the convulsions and screams of his son and other hostages.
Pierre became angry because the deaths were taking way too long and they were too loud and messy, so he shot Carol and Courtney Nesbitt in the back of their heads. Holy shit.
Jeez.
Killing Carol but leaving Courtney alive. Really? Pierre then shot at Oren Walker but missed. Fatally shot Stanley before again shooting at Oren, this time grazing the back of his head. Ooh. Pierre took Ansley to the far left of the basement, forced her to remove her clothes, then repeatedly raped her after telling Andrews to leave for 30 minutes. Jeez. Afterwards, he allowed her to use the bathroom while he watched. Then he dragged her, still naked, back to the other hostages, threw her on her face, and shot her in the back of the head.
Jeez.
Man.
According to Oren's testimony, her last words were, "I am too young to die." Andrews and Pierre noted that Oren was still alive, so Pierre mounted him, wrapped a wire around his throat, and tried to strangle him. When this failed, Pierre and Andrews inserted a ballpoint pen into Oren's ear. Pierre stomped it until it punctured his eardrum, broke, and exited his throat.
What?
Pierre and Andrews went upstairs, finished loading the equipment into their van, and left. That's got to be shit.
What? Dude, that's just ridiculous.
Ballpoint pen in your
Wait a
ear.
minute. Why would... wow, I'm in total shock. What the fuck's going on? Why would they... They're just robbing the place.
No, clearly not.
Wow. Victims including the following 5 individuals, 3 of whom were murdered. Each of the victims were bound, forced to drink Drano, and were later shot. Nonetheless, 2 individuals now deceased survived their injuries. Sherry Michelle Ansley, January 24th, 1956 born. She passed away on the 22nd of April in 1974. When was this?
22nd of April.
She was 18 years old, an employee at a hi-fi shop. She had been hired only a week before the murder.
Oh,
no. She had recently become engaged and planned to be married on the 5th of August, 1974. Ansley was raped and moited by Pierre. Man.
Well, then we had Byron Courtney Nesbitt, September 25th, 1957, and died June 4th, 2002.
Oh.
He was age 16, was a student at Ogden High School. Although he survived his injuries, he suffered from amnesia and was thus unable to testify at the trial. Nesbitt was able to return to school more than a year after the incident, and he graduated with his class at the high school in 1976.
Wait, if it was doing that to their lips, how would they be able to talk? Because that would have killed the throat, you think, and your insides. It had all kinds.
I don't think anybody would. They probably coughed it up. That's why they were trying to put the duct tape on their mouths. I don't think you can even digest that or get it down. You probably throw up automatically.
I hope so.
Well, due to the brain damage from his head wound, however, he was forced to drop out of college. As he could not hold down a job, he had to apply for Social Security assistance. November 15th, 1985, Nesbitt married Catherine Hunter. He suffered chronic pain for the rest of his life and died June 4th, 2002 at the age of 44.
Oh, man.
So that's another murder.
All right. Carol Elaine Nesbitt, born Christmas Day, 1921. Tragically passed away April 22nd, this very day. Age 52, was the mother of victim Byron Courtney Nesbitt. She died at the hospital after being shot by Pierre. Oren William Walker, born September 17, 1930, died February 13, 2000. Age 43, was the father of victim Stanley Walker. Survived the attack, testified at the trial against the perpetrator. He died on 13th February 2000 at the age 69.
Damn,
dude, he had to live through life like that.
Right.
Then you got Stanley Oren Walker, his boy, right? Employee at Hi-Fi Shop, moita dead by Pierre.
The bodies were discovered almost 3 hours later when Oren's wife and other son came to the store looking for them. Oren's son heard noises coming from the basement and broke down the back door while Mrs. Walker called the Ogden police. Stanley Walker and Ansley were already dead. Carol Naisbitt was taken by ambulance to St. She was survived for 4 hours, dude.
Man.
Imagine if they got there sooner. She probably would have lived. She was taken by ambulance to St. Benedict's Hospital, which is now the Ogden Regional Medical Center, but was pronounced dead on arrival.
Jeez.
Courtney, although not expected to live, survived with severe and irreparable brain damage. He was hospitalized for 266 days before being released. Warren Walker survived with extensive burns to his mouth and chin, as well as the damage to his ear caused by the pen. He probably was deaf for the rest of his life.
In spite of his injuries, Orrin was able to give a description of the two leading robbers, with that of the man who fired the killing shots on the victims, a short-statured black male with glasses, with a Caribbean accent. He would later be identified as Dale Pierre. Hours after news of the crime broke, an anonymous Air Force employee called the Ogden police told them that Andrews had confided to him months earlier. One of these days, I'm going to rob that hi-fi shop, and if anybody gets in the way, I'm going to kill them. But they didn't get in their way.
Okay, they were there.
They said, do what you want.
Well, hours later, 2 teenage boys dumpster diving at Hill Air Force Base near the barracks Pierre and Andrews were living in contacted the police after discovering the victims' wallets and purses, recognizing their pictures from the driver license.
What idiots.
Detective Deloy White, who responded to the scene believing the killers might be in the crowd, put on a show for the gathered airmen.
Oh.
Speaking dramatically, he waved each piece of evidence in the air with tongs as he removed it from the dumpster. He's like, I got you.
Right. Later, he noted that most of the service personnel who gathered around the dumpster stood still and watched in relative silence, with the exception of 2 men, later identified as Pierre and Andrews, who paced around the crowd, speaking loudly and making frantic gestures with their hands.
Well, why would you do that?
Idiots. The detective later received an award from the Utah branch of the Justice Department for his use of the proactive techniques.
For you, buddy.
Based on the 2 men's reactions to the evidence being removed from the trash bin, Andrews and Pierre were taken into questioning. A search warrant was then issued for their barracks. You don't think they should? I don't think you should be able to get a search warrant for barracks. You're on government military property. Just come straight in that.
So personal, private property.
You're government.
Doesn't matter.
You're government. Ain't no private property in government.
Of course there is.
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be. That's why
It's not prison.
It is.
Not really. These guys clearly just went out of the barracks and killed people. I don't think prisoners are doing that. Right? Some are let off a work release or something, maybe. Right?
They go in the yard and kill people.
That's true. Police found, or in the bathroom,
Right.
showers. Police found flyers for the hi-fi shop and a rental contract for a unit at a public storage facility.
Jeez.
Found the issuance of another search warrant. Stereo equipment taken from the hi-fi shop, later identified via serial numbers, was recovered from the storage unit.
Hey, look at that.
Don't leave your receipts going around.
I mean, come on.
I mean, geez. Also recovered was the half-empty bottle of Drano. Why, you couldn't even throw that out?
Oh,
you threw the purses and shit out.
Why would you even take that with you?
Right. A few weeks later, a third airman, Keith Roberts, was taken. Oh, so he was an airman. Good for you. He was taken into custody after he was identified through questioning on the base as a participant in the robbery.
Jeez, man. Pierre, Andrews, and Roberts charged with first-degree murder and aggravated robbery. The joint trial of Pierre, Andrews, and Roberts for first-degree murder and robbery began on 15th October 1974.
Well, that's a speedy trial.
In Farmington, neighboring Davis County. November 16th, 1974, Pierre and Andrews were convicted of all charges.
Oh, geez. It was only a day later, huh?
Shouldn't even been a day.
Right.
While Roberts was convicted only of robbery.
Roberts was a robber.
All right. 4 days later, Pierre and Andrews sentenced to death. Roberts was sentenced to 5 years life in prison, but he was paroled in 1987. He still spent 13 years in prison.
Yes, he did. During the trial, it was revealed that Pierre and Andrews had robbed the store with the intent of killing anyone they encountered, and in the months prior had been looking for ways to commit the murders quietly and cleanly.
Oh, wow.
The two then repeatedly watched the film Magnum Force, in which a prostitute played by Margaret Avery is forced to drink Drano and is shown immediately dropping dead. Oh, shit. Never trust the movies, bud.
Right.
Pierre and he's like, why is this taking so long? Magnum Force, they died instantly.
Jeez.
Pierre and Andrews decided that this would be an efficient method of murder and decided to use it in their crime. Idiots, dude.
Wow. Survivor Orrin Walker was a star witness for the prosecution. Due to his amnesia, Courtney Naisbitt was unable to testify. His father, Byron Hunter Naisbitt, did testify, though. The official police report stated that 6 black men driving 2 vans committed the robbery. Roberts and another man remained with the cars. 2 others loaded the vans, while Pierre and Andrews tortured and killed the victims. Jeez, you think the other guys knew what was going on until they heard the gunshots, probably? Or that maybe that's something.
I'm sure they knew after, right?
Right. However, Detectives only had enough evidence to convict Pierre, Andrews, and Roberts.
Okay. Well, Ogden Police Department officer Deloy White, who was a detective when he worked the case, observed Andrews was the brains behind the whole deal, the one who organized it. Pierre was the enforcer. Andrews would corroborate White's statement in an interview with KUTV before his execution in 1992.
Wow.
Admitted that he targeted the store after becoming acquainted with Stanley Walker. Oh, so he knew the guy.
That's bullshit. He was sentenced to death in 1974, and he lived all the way to 1992. Stupid.
Right.
Dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. Dude lived a whole life.
Well, did he, though?
Still in prison. I don't care. He's still alive.
Did he, though? 20 years. 18, 16 years.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, he met Stanley Walker a few months prior to the robbery and blaming solely Pierre for the excessive violence leading up to the killings. Yeah, Pierre means...
Let's take a look at old Dale Selby Pierre. November 16th, 1974, he convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery for the hi-fi crimes. 20th November 1974, he was given 3 death sentences, 1 for each of the Moitas. While in prison, Pierre changed his name 27 times.
Jeez.
Reportedly to protect his family name from notoriety, finally settling on Pierre Dale Selby. Really? Okay.
It took you 27 times to come up with that.
Wow.
Jeez, why couldn't you just call yourself like Patrick Smith or something?
Right. At his clemency hearing, he said he had a strict upbringing and was a changed man.
Yeah, I bet you weren't. Oh, after being denied clemency, which means he's about to be put to death,
Right.
He was then executed by lethal injection August 28th, 1987 at the age of 34. At the time of his death, Pierre bequeathed all his money, which was $29 to Andrews. Oh, wow. Look at him, still buds, huh? He's like, give him my $29.
They're in the same prison?
Probably.
Right.
What, do they got one in Utah?
Right. Same freaking
Right.
bunk.
Pierre declined a last meal, instead spending his final day fasting, praying, singing hymns, and reading the Bible. His last words were, "Thank you. I'm just going to say my prayers." The Deseret News
man, huh?
right, reports that Pierre said to no one in particular moments before his execution, "I'll be glad when this is over."
I mean, he might be. Maybe he did.
I mean,
Pick up that Bible
some
and-
soul searching.
Changed man. At his clemency hearing, Pierre said the crime took a course of its own. It wasn't planned that way. People kept coming in. I just panicked.
Oh, lock the door.
The only way to prevent that, what was happening, was to have been moved away from the Air Force entirely. Of course, the alcohol and the pills I was consuming didn't help. Volumes, Reds, Black Beauties, Yellow Jackets. Everyone has a limit beyond which they won't go. Drugs, etc., can alter that limit, he says. I tell myself, you have to accept responsibility for it. You did it. You were there. You can't rationalize it. However, Andrew said he never saw him drunk or using drugs. He's like, I don't know.
He
never did any of that stuff.
Jeez. Well, Orrin Walker testified during the clemency hearing. He called Pierre a sadist and said he deserved to die, saying after he shot Mrs. Naisbitt first, then he was kind of prancing or walking in a manner that I got the impression he was kind of enjoying what he was doing. This has been hard for me. It's hard for me to believe that I was ever involved with this. My son Stanley's life was taken with 2 shots and Drano. He tried 5 different times to kill me. Each one could have been lethal. It certainly has changed our lives. Walker said that his younger son, traumatized by his older brother's murder, slept on a mattress in his parents' bedroom and refused to go into the basement of the house.
Wow.
Most of my wife's time is spent in bed trying to forget, Walker said. I bet.
You think that place is haunted?
The store?
Yeah.
I would assume. Right? I would. I'd taunt. Yeah.
Let's take a look at William Andrews. During the trial, it was revealed that he and Pierre had the intention of killing anyone.
Yes, we know.
Right. Andrews' death conviction was considered especially controversial because he did not directly kill any of the victims, although he did admit to forcefully administering Drano down their throats. I mean, that's
Did kill him.
intent, right? Bodily harm. 20th November 1974, he was given 3 death sentences, 1 for each of the Moita victims. From an article in the New York Times, July 19, 1992, it reads, "A bitter fight over the definition of murder and the influence of racism. Old Mormon teachings and new legal interpretations have come down to this. Should William Andrews live or die? Mr. Andrews, a black man who was scheduled to be executed on July 30th, was not present when his accomplice, also black, shot 3 white people to death." They had put that in there, right? In a robbery in 1974. But he admits that before he left the scene, he tortured 5 people by forcing them to drink Drano. A caustic drain cleaner.
Well, 2 of them survived. 1 with serious brain damage. The Utah Supreme Court upheld the death sentence for Mr. Andrews on Friday, making a total of 18 unsuccessful state and federal appeals. Jeez. Wow. The last chance appears to be an appeal before the Utah Board of Pardons. Civil rights advocates say Mr. Andrews received the death penalty even though more notorious white murderers had been allowed to live.
They also note that during the sentencing, someone slipped a note to the jury box that read, "Hang those N-words." The United States Supreme Court refused to hear an appeal for Mr. Andrews.
They actually said the word.
Right. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear an appeal for Mr. Andrews in 1988, but Justice Thurgood Marshall issued a dissent, joined by William J. Brennan Jr., in which he called the note slipped to the jury a vulgar incident of lynch mob racism, reminiscent of the Reconstruction days. Right, 1870s and 80s.
Mr. Andrews' lawyers also note that the jury was all white. Utah has a small black population currently. Blacks make up less than 1% of the population. Well, most of the jurors were Mormon, and at the time when the Church of Latter-day Saints did not allow blacks to become priests.
Wow.
Even though that ban has been overturned, it has left a legacy of distrust.
Cool. Thanks for putting that in there, New York Times.
Right.
Was it New York Times?
Yes.
At his trial, Mr. Andrews had a defense lawyer who had recently graduated from law school. "I've never seen such a raw case of racism," said Stephen Hawkins, a lawyer from the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. "The entire case was infected with racism," he says. He also said a prosecutor had kept a black prospective juror off the jury. He's like, look at that.
Where's the evidence for that, buddy? Supporters of the death penalty in this case say Mr. Andrews knew that his actions would result in deaths, a standard for a murder conviction established by Supreme Court rulings.
Right.
A medical examiner's report stated that the victims would have died from the Drano within 12 hours if they had not been shot first.
Right.
These three victims were, well, that's clearly not because two of them survived.
Right.
Is that, why do you guys, that's stupid.
Well, they got help.
Yes, but stomach pump or something. These three victims were pleading for their lives, said Earl Dorius, a former, I don't know what you said, a former state's attorney who worked on the case. Right. This was brutal torture, he says.
Ooh, Mr. Andrews, who spoke recently by telephone from the Utah State Prison, expressed remorse over his actions. But he said he had not believed that the victims would die. I didn't know. He says, "I did pour the Drano into the cup, but it was not with the intent of using it to kill the people. In hindsight, I don't know what I was thinking. I was only 19. Mr. Hawkins, the lawyer, said Mr. Andrews was guilty of assault, not moida. Was it assault, he says? Yeah. Has William Andrews paid time for being an accomplice? Yeah.
Well, support for Mr. Andrews has been significantly stronger here among blacks who have held marches in his support. But some support has come from whites, including Mormons. Boyer Jarvis, a retired University of Utah professor and a Mormon, wrote in the Salt Lake Tribune that Utah had an abundance of two kinds of justice, one for members of the white majority, another for blacks.
Wow.
At the time Mr. Andrews was sentenced, Utah law did not give jurors the option of sentencing him to life without parole. Well, since then, the law has been changed to allow that option.
Oh, look at that.
Since it was changed, was it changed after he died, I'm assuming? Because
Probably. Usually
all these states that like overturned the death penalty and stuff,
right?
Everybody obviously who was
life.
Right. Interesting.
Lawyers for Mr. Andrews asked the Utah Supreme Court for a new sentencing trial that would include the option of life without parole. But the court ruled that the law could not be applied retroactively.
Oh, what a pussy. Yes, it can.
Wow. Tim Ford said during the trial, people in Utah looked at Bill Andrews and only saw a scary-looking black guy. He was another lawyer for Mr. Andrews. He said, he went on to say, they didn't see a scared 19-year-old kid, he said. But Mr. Doria said Mr. Andrews should have exhausted his chances. For the sake of the families of the victims, I think it's time that the justice system brought this to a close, he said.
Oh, Andrews was indeed executed by lethal injection.
And that was the end of the New York Times article there.
Right. Well, Andrews was indeed executed by lethal injection at 1:30 a.m. That's stupid. On July 30th, 1992, at the age of 37, 18 years on death row.
There for 18. If you sentence somebody to death, kill him.
His last meal was obviously he fucking peeled 18 times and I just kill him right away.
Yes. Murder him.
It's ignorant. His last meal was a banana split, which he shared with his niece and sister. Andrew's last words spoken to Deputy Corrections Director Bruce Egan were, "Thank those who tried so hard to keep me alive. I hope they continue to fight for equal justice after I'm gone. Tell my family goodbye, and I love them." After being strapped onto the gurney at 1:35 a.m., Andrews lifted his head and said, "I love you. Bye-bye." To his sister, just before the injections were administered. He was declared dead at 1:46 a.m. That's a long time.
Right.
After Andrews' execution, Naisbitt told the Salt Lake Tribune he had forgiven Selby and Andrews, but added, "Where does the anger a victim feels for the perpetrator go when the perpetrator is gone?"
Right.
Right. He's like, now I'm going to start beating my wife.
Right.
Just kidding, guys.
Andrews' clemency hearing, his lawyers pointed to his age at the time of the crime and argued he was on drugs at the time. They also said he was a changed man, albeit Andrews' prison record showed repeat violations for setting fires, concealing makeshift weapons, possessing drugs and alcohol, planning escapes, and assaulting guards. This guy was
You guys
not a
lied.
changed man.
Okay, well, let's take a look at old Keith Leon Roberts. What happened to him? He was 19 years old at the time of the crime as well. He was acquitted of the murder after court found that he had no role in or knowledge of the murders. He was, however, convicted of 2 counts of aggravated robbery and sentenced to 5 years to life. Eventually got paroled May 12, 1987 after nearly 13 years and moved to Chandler, Oklahoma to live with relatives.
He had to do something if it was 5 to life to be in there for 13. Because after 5, all right. I wonder what his prison record looks like.
Probably the same.
Right.
He did die by suicide on August 8th, 1992, barely a week after Andrews' execution.
Really?
So he's probably like, I'm the last living guy involved in this crime.
He couldn't handle it.
I gotta go.
All
Right.
that guilt. Wow, poor guy. Pierre and Andrews became notoriously hated prisoners at Utah State Prison and were particularly reviled on death row. 1977, convicted murderer Gary Gilmore, also facing capital punishment, was reported to have said this: "I'll see you in hell, Pierre and Andrews." This is when he passed their cells on the way to his execution by firing squad. Oh. However, the Deseret News...
Firing squad. What a G, dude.
Right. However, the Deseret News reported that Gilmore's parting words to the hi-fi killer moments before his execution were, "Adios, Pierre and Andrews. I'll be seeing you directly."
Well, same thing. Following the handing down of death sentences to the defendants, the NAACP and Amnesty International campaigned to commute Pierre and Andrews' death sentences. The NAACP demanded that Pierre and Andrews' death sentences should be revoked because of racial bias at the trial. They noted that the defendants were both black and the victims and jury were all white. According to Amnesty International, the sole black member of the jury pool was stricken preemptorily by the prosecution during jury selection. However, it was revealed that the juror was dismissed because he was a law enforcement officer who personally knew just about everyone tied to the case. So there we go.
This whole time they finally mentioned it.
That New York Times article,
right,
that was talking about that.
Failed
Why
to
didn't they
mention
say that? Piss off, dude. That was 92. That just shows you how media has been fucked forever now.
In addition, lawyers for the state pointed out that the jury makeup made perfect sense given Ogden's demographics. The city was overwhelmingly white at the time, and it was not intentional. I mean, what can you do? Andrews also accused the judicial system of racism following the NAACP's requests for reduced sentences. In an interview with USA Today, he claimed that he had never intended to kill anyone. This was later rebutted when detectives cited a statement by Andrews in which he admitted being the one who purchased the Drano, and he brought it to the store on the night of its killing.
And supposedly watched the movie they all died.
Like, look, they die right away.
After Pierre's execution, a petition for a stay of Andrews' execution, I'd be pissed if I was Pierre's family. A stay of his execution was submitted to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The commission petition alleged that a handwritten note hanging the N-words had been found in the jury area during a recess, and that the judge had refused a request for a mistrial and a right to question jurors concerning the note.
Right, you should have done that.
Should probably at least question.
Right, so I mean, come on, you got something legal there you can work with.
The fate of the physical note itself is unknown. Despite these appeals, both death sentences were upheld. December 1996, the Inter-American Commission found that the United States had violated its international obligations by denying William Andrews a trial free from racial discrimination.
Really? Okay, I get it. FBI trainees at the FBI Academy at Quantico, Virginia, were taught about this very case. It was included as a sample case in the FBI's crime classification manual.
Why?
Right. The experiences of Courtney Naismith and his family became the basis of Gary Kinder's book, Victim, The Other Side of Murder. And that was in 1982. At one point, he said Dale Selby Pierre was a psychopath and that Andrews and Roberts were terrified of him. The hi-fi murders were the basis of the CBS television movie Aftermath, A Test of Love. And that was in 1991, starring Richard Chamberlain and Michael Learned.
All right.
Who's Richard Chamberlain? That sounds familiar.
Well, I don't know.
We'll never find it out.
We definitely won't. There you go. We have officially returned to true crime.
That was some good stuff there. That was interesting.
Twas
Kind of bullshit, but
right.
shit.
Decent one.
That's almost as bad as the girl on fire that got beaten in the head for 3 hours straight.
Right, driving around town and
Man,
stabbing her and
right,
setting her on fire.
jeez.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you're in for here on out.
We still don't know the whole story of why. If there's any like more memoirs from these guys or anything?
From these guys?
Yeah.
Well, now they all died.
No, from the Moiters.
Yeah, they all died.
Like their backstories
No, they all died.
and all that. They didn't all die.
They all died. What do you mean? How didn't they die? They're all
20 years
dead,
in prison.
right?
Yeah. No backstory on these motherfuckers or where they grew up, how they were treated as kids.
Don't think that matters
Well,
at all.
usually all the other stories have stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, some do, some don't. Clearly, we'll have another one of these. I think it's probably going to be a
Chicago Tylenol. What's that?
Tylenol murders. Clearly,
What?
never heard of it.
You can't die from Tylenol.
Well, you can when they're intentionally laced.
With what?
I don't think it was intentionally laced.
With
It was-
ibuprofen?
Yeah, it was drug tampering. Laced with potassium cyanide.
Oh, no.
Some people died. It's not really a long story, though. Oh, yeah. So next week we'll do
Something.
probably Jodi Arias.
Who?
Jodi Arias.
Right.
She famously killed her boyfriend in his shower, stabbed him to death,
That's crazy.
and shot him in the head after he was dead.
Right.
And one of the most publicized cases in recent memory. I think it was in like 2011 that happened, or something, 2008 or something like
I
that.
don't remember the details of that.
It's a long story, so it's probably might even be a two-parter because it's a real long one.
Was he a violent person?
No, well, I don't know. We'll get there. She was just a psycho, pretty much. Stalker, couldn't handle being broken up with, that
jeez.
type of
Right.
stuff.
What's that
And
movie with Mark Wahlberg? Fear?
fear. Yeah,
Don't break up with me.
well, opposite, but right. Female.
Single white female?
Never seen it.
What? Never seen Single White with Demi Moore?
No.
Is it Demi Moore?
I
It's
don't.
not Demi Moore.
How the fuck would I know? I've never seen it. So
I don't think it is Demi Moore.
yeah, so we'll be back.
I think they remade it.
For that
It's called Single Black Female.
next week.
It's not.
And
It might be.
the first episode of November will be back to the Mafia, and we'll cycle it out like that. Every first Tuesday of the new month will be Mafia, and all the rest from here on out will be true crime stuff. And reminder, go check out Battles of the American Civil War. We're wrapping up 1863, about to go into 1864, last full year of the war. And the Confederates trying to make a little run before the old Battle of Appomattox Station that pretty much ends the old shindig there.
This war is 3 years too long.
Yes, it is. It's about, 3 years.
Ridiculous.
YouTube, Bang Dang Network. Give us a subscription, or Apple Podcast or Spotify. Give us a review. And we shall be back next week for Psycho Jodi Arias. Where the Mouth of Michigan is with.
Bang dang.